Hi, my name is Joe Bellick, and I'm the founder of Bellick Law, LLP. We are proud sponsors of the Mesothelioma Research Foundation. We have been honored to do this work for 25 years, representing people with mesothelioma and their families. And part of our commitment to our clients is to give back and sponsor research and advocacy efforts and engagement across the mesothelioma community.
Hi, I'm Trey Branham. Dean Omar Branham and Shirley is proud to sponsor this year's Mesothelioma Applied Research Foundation Conference. The 34 lawyers at Dobbs have more than 400 collective years providing legal representation to victims of this insidious cancer. We applaud the leadership of MARF and this community for its tireless dedication to finding a cure for this totally preventable disease.
Hi, I'm Mary.
And I'm Morgan, and we are registered nurses at MRHFM Law Firm. Our firm exclusively helps mesothelioma patients across the country navigate their diagnosis as well as any of their legal needs. The Mesothelioma Applied Research Foundation has done an incredible job advocating and educating mesothelioma patients. They built a supportive community where patients can find the most up-to-date medical information, as well as be surrounded by a community of other people going through a similar journey.
MRHFM is honored to continue our support of their mission and to be a part of the advocacy and awareness they bring to mesothelioma cancer.
Welcome to Meso TV. I'm Julie White, the Director of Patient Services. I'm pleased today to have Dr. Timothy Yap, who is a medical oncologist and physician scientist from MD Anderson. Welcome, Dr. Yap. Could you tell us a bit about your role at MD Anderson and your focus on early phase drug development for cancer?
Julia, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. It's a real privilege for me to be here, and thanks for all you do for all of our patients. So I'm a medical oncologist and a physician scientist at MD Anderson with a big focus on drug discovery and drug development. So I serve as the vice president and head of clinical development in our therapeutics discovery division. And I'm also a professor in our investigational cancer therapeutics department, which is our early phase clinical trials department, where we run early phase clinical trials, including the study that we're going to be discussing today.
Thank you. So that brings me to our topic that today we're going to be discussing a trial that you are the lead investigator on, which is called Study to Evaluate VT3989 in patients with metastatic solid tumors. And the sponsor is a company called Vivace Therapeutics. And I'm going to let you take over and explain it for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. So I'm going to show some of the slides that we presented at the European Society of Medical Oncology, or ESMO Congress in Berlin that was held in October last year, October 2025. And as Julia mentioned, this was a study, there's really a phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trial. We had previously presented the initial data from the phase 1 dose escalation portion, but in this particular presentation, I focused on the safety and the efficacy of this, what we call a YAP-TEAD inhibitor, VT3989, in patients with refractory pleural and non-pleural mesothelioma. These are my disclosures. So what is VT3989? Well, it's the really first in class. So first time we're targeting the YAP-TEAD pathway. So why target the YAP-TEAD pathway? Essentially, there is a key signaling pathway called the Hippo signaling pathway, and this blocks YAP and TAZ proteins by blocking the translocation of these proteins into the nucleus, so nuclear translocation, and therefore blocks the interaction with another protein called TEAD in the nucleus. Why is this important? It's important because NF2 mutations or Merlin loss. What is Merlin? Merlin's the gene product of NF2. But these alterations essentially lead to the hippo pathway dysregulation. And this is important because it is common in mesothelioma. Approximately 70% of mesothelioma patients will have this alteration. And ultimately, because it's so frequently seen in mesothelioma, we felt at the get-go when we were designing this trial that molecular patient selection was not required, that we could simply give this drug to patients with mesothelioma, whether it's plural or non-plural mesothelioma, that this would potentially benefit patients. But of course, this is a first-in-class agent. It's the first time we're developing a YAP-TEAD inhibitor. So the drug was called VT3989, and we brought this into this first-in-human phase 1 trial. It is what we call a small molecule inhibitor of autopalmitylation of TEAD. So what is that? Palmitylation essentially describes the action on a conserved cysteine in the YAP binding domain that is critical for YAP-TEAD interaction. And what this compound or this drug does, VT3989 does, is to occupy this palmitate pocket and essentially blocks the YAP and TEAD interaction, and therefore blocks any transcriptional activity along that pathway. And therefore it helps to target these tumors with NF2 mutations or Merlin loss, which again is commonly observed in patients who have mesothelioma, whether it's plural or whether it's non-plural mesothelioma. Why is this important? As you all know, there is a great unmet need for rational, targeted mesothelioma therapies. We know that the 5-year survival is dire. It's only 10% for plural mesothelioma. It's only 20% for peritoneal mesothelioma. And importantly, unfortunately, the median overall survival after second-line therapy is only 6 to 8 months. And critically, there are no molecularly targeted treatments that are approved, and very limited systemic therapies that we have for all of our patients. Of course, we have chemotherapy agents like platinum chemotherapy with pemetrexed. We have immunotherapy agents like ipi/nivo or pembrolizumab, and combinations with chemotherapy. However, the most commonly used chemotherapy for the third-line setting, such as vinorelbine or gemcitabine, is number one, it's given intravenously, and importantly, it's got dire activity, poor activity, with significant toxicity. So we need to do better for all of our patients. And that really provided the impetus to move into this phase 1 and 2 clinical trial. As mentioned, we previously presented some early data of the dose escalation phase of this phase 1 trial of VT3989, where we tested different doses and different schedules of this drug. And today I'll be discussing and showing you data from our expansion phase 2 cohorts, where we assessed patients at a dose of 100 milligrams given daily for 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. And we tested it in patients with plural and non-plural mesothelioma and also other solid tumors as well. The relevant inclusion criteria found on the left-hand side. You can see that all patients had to be fit and well with a performance status of 0 to 1. They had to have decent organ function as displayed on the left. We didn't collect the mutational status at baseline, but we tested it retrospectively. In addition to that, the primary goals and endpoints of this trial were to look at safety, tolerability, and to establish the recommended phase 2 dose. The secondary endpoints included looking at efficacy, so anti-tumor activity, the pharmacokinetics, so what the drug exposures look like, the time to response, and also any impact we have on patient safety. As an exploratory trial endpoint, we also looked at the signaling pathways in tumor biopsies collected from patients. We looked at changes in the blood in liquid biopsies over time. And we also look at changes in the proteins such as YAP and myelin using a technique called immunohistochemistry. So I'm going to start by discussing the drug exposure, so pharmacokinetics. So as mentioned, we had established that the dose of 100 milligrams given once daily, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, given as pills, was recommended as the recommended phase 2 dose. And the reasons for that was we had found that VT3989 has a very long half-life, so how long it actually lasts in the body. The half-life was approximately 9 days. And we found through these pharmacokinetic studies that the intermittent dosing at this dose, 100 milligrams given once daily, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, provided that sweet spot, the optimal therapeutic drug exposures. We also found that a lower dose at 50 milligrams as well, in the same schedule, showed clinically meaningful activity with responses as well. And therefore, our plan was to start all patients at 100 milligrams once daily, given 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And if they needed a dose reduction, we could then go down to 50 milligrams once daily, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and still be clinically meaningful for all of our patients. Now, in total, from the data I presented, we treated 172 patients. You can see that the median age was 65 years, more males than females. All patients had an ECOG performance status, so in terms of the fitness of 0 to 1. There was a range of different tumor types, primarily patients with mesothelioma, including pleural and non-pleural mesothelioma. We also treated other tumor types, including sarcomas, meningiomas, and other tumor types. We had patients who had the NF2 mutations, about a third of these patients, but also the majority of patients either did not have these mutations or it was unknown. And as mentioned earlier, we felt that patients would benefit if they had mesothelioma, regardless of the mutation. In addition to that, this was a very heavily pretreated patient population with a median of 3 prior lines of therapy, including chemotherapy agents and/or immunotherapies. We treated patients with up to 8 prior lines of therapy, so a very heavily pretreated patient population. In terms of safety, this is important. We found that VT3989 was very safe and well tolerated. You can see that the majority of side effects were mild and what we consider as grade 1 to 2 in a vast majority of patients. In a small minority of patients, we did see some grade 3 or worse toxicities. But the most common treatment-related side effects were low-grade fatigue, so a bit of tiredness, protein in the urine, and also some swelling in the limbs. The proteinuria, so protein in the urine that we observed, was fully reversible, and there was no impact on the creatinine clearance or the kidney function in patients, or certainly the levels of the albumin in the blood. And most importantly for me as a physician, the discontinuation rates in patients due to any side effects was extremely low. Out of 172 patients, this was down at 3%. And more importantly, the efficacy. We actually saw compelling efficacy with tumor shrinkage in multiple patients, but disease stabilization in the majority of patients, as you can see in this waterfall plot. Importantly as well, there was very durable clinical benefit at these doses. For example, 8 of these patients have actually been on this drug, VT3989, for over a year, and 1 patient approaching 2 years. And there are multiple patients still ongoing at the data cutoff for this presentation. And overall, here are the efficacy data. So we saw responses in 26% to 32% of patients. We saw disease stabilization in 54 to 60% of patients for a disease control rate of approximately 85%. And approximately in these patients, the progression-free survival was between 25 and 40 weeks. And that certainly compares very favorably when you think about the response rates of just 5 to 8% and a progression-free survival of only 15 weeks in standard of care chemotherapy agents like gemcitabine or vinorelbine.
Yes.
We shouldn't forget that patients who were treated in our clinical trial were very heavily pretreated patients. Here are some scans from a couple of our patients, both with pleural mesothelioma. You can see these are CT scans at baseline on the left-hand side, and on the right showing the response on treatment. The top scans are from a patient with pleural mesothelioma without any NF2 mutations found. And that patient had a partial response and shrinkage of their tumors by greater than 40%. And the bottom, you can see some scans from another patient with pleural mesothelioma. Again, no NF2 mutations needed. And that patient had shrinkage of the disease by nearly 70%. So to conclude, we've observed compelling efficacy and patient benefit with this drug, VT3989, in patients with pleural and non-pleural refractory, heavily pretreated mesothelioma. It was very well tolerated, with mainly grade 1 to 2 mild side effects. The main side effect, or one of the main side effects, included proteinuria, so protein in the urine, but this was fully reversible once you hold the drug, and there certainly was no decline in kidney function. And we've established a safe dose that we think provides the best balance between efficacy and safety. And these findings have now supported a registrational third-line phase 3 clinical trial in mesothelioma. And these findings have also led to the FDA orphan drug and FDA fast track designations for the treatment of patients with mesothelioma. With that, I'll pause, Julie, and I'll be happy to, take any questions that you may have.
Well, first, there's been a lot of excitement about this trial as it is. There are compelling results so far, and it is, as everything you said, there's patients that I've talked to who have been on the trial, and we're all very excited to see where this goes. A couple things I wanted to ask. You mentioned the phase 3 trial. Do we have any word on when that will be opening?
Yeah, so the study is being activated currently, so it's imminent.
Okay. Then you also mentioned two terms that I wondered if you could briefly explain. The VT received the FDA organ drug designation. Can you explain to us what that is, and also the designation of fast track? Does that mean that people can get this drug now, or?
No, it's really more of a regulatory designation, if you like, more to do with how the FDA actually reviews the potential future approval of this drug. So, for example, FDA orphan drug designation is a special status that's really granted to drugs for rare diseases, or conditions where the costs can be recovered, and it's to really incentivize drug development by providing benefits like tax credits, fee waivers, and 7 years of market exclusivity, and to really try and encourage research into such conditions that are often overlooked, as you know.
What makes them choose this drug?
Well, it was really focused, and they selected this drug because, number one, of the benefit that we have seen, or the potential benefit that we've already seen in mesothelioma. And as I said, it's really based on the findings that we've just presented in terms of the efficacy, but also the safety as well. And in terms of the FDA Fast Track designation, again, it's an FDA program set up to speed up the review of new drugs for cancers like mesothelioma, where there's a great unmet need. And it really offers early, frequent FDA communications and a rolling review of applications from the drug company to try and get these drugs ultimately to patients faster. So it's kind of a special lane for drugs that are looking promising in serious conditions like mesothelioma. And we hope that, ultimately this will be favorably reviewed at the FDA eventually.
What are the top things a patient should ask when considering a clinical trial? It's all kind of overwhelming, but what do they need to consider?
That's a great question. Number one, first question really is why? Why do we think this is a compelling option? What is the rationale? Is there some scientific reason for it? Are there clinical data that support the use of this drug in me? Is this a drug that's looking promising? What have you already seen on this particular clinical trial? What phase is it? Have you looked at the dose? What kind of side effects have you observed to date? What kind of efficacy has one seen so far on this particular clinical trial? And then the logistics. I think the logistics are always important because these are ultimately clinical trials. And because of that, we have to observe patients very closely, usually more frequently at the beginning of the study, and then it gets better over time, especially once we know that a drug is going to be safe for patients and they're tolerating it well. But it's really important to find out more about the logistics, find out about any potential reimbursement that's provided as part of the clinical trial, and ultimately just have a frank discussion with friends, family, with your own local physicians, with the referring physicians, and also to find out as well what the other standard of care options are, right? What are approved options? What are the alternatives to this particular clinical trial? These are all important points. And of course, what phase is it in? Is it phase 1, phase 2, phase 3? Is there any randomization done, so on and so forth?
And the last question is, if a patient is interested in looking at one of the many clinical trials that you have at MD Anderson, what is the best way for them to go about getting information?
Yeah, great question. I think they should speak to their physicians first, to their oncologists first. And, there is there are very clear instructions on the MD Anderson website.
Okay.
Getting referred, and they can actually just click the button to actually then get referred. And there are teams in place ready to help at MD Anderson.
Okay. I've had patients who've told me that their physicians have said, find yourself a good TEAD inhibitor trial, or go out and look for clinical trial options, and they're kind of lost. So that's why I was asking. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So your website's the first place. Well, I thank you for helping our community to understand this trial and MD Anderson, and I appreciate your time, Dr. Yap.
No problem at all. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.